I had a lot of decision fatigue where you have to make a lot more decisions on your own, and there's not somebody else making those decisions, which sounds great, but that's a lot of stress on somebody to have to make all those decisions for yourself.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems, right? I mean,
not those regular big problems.
Nope, not regular big problems. The big. We're gonna 3X the bigs on that, because that makes it sound more important and more pertinent, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, like, I always start thinking, especially this time of year, desert life and water, and
you can make fun of me?
No. I was thinking of the comment your grandmother made the other day about driving around and how unusual it was to not see green yards in front of all the houses.
Yep, there is I wouldn't say there's no green here in Tucson. That's what the uneducated, the uncultured folks would say, right? No, sorry, Grandma, but really, it's because you got to look hard for the green this time of year. Here, it's here. You got to really look to find it, though.
Yeah, usually in some shade.
Clustered around my lemon tree because it's the only thing getting water.
Well, and also in shifting to our guest, Stephen Bump, my thought is can you still see snow up on the mountain up there in Erie?
We can. In fact, I'm looking out my window and I see snow. So yes.
There you go. There's still some on Pikes Peak, but it won't be long. I can tell you that down here.
Yeah, Mount Lemmon is dry, believe it or not.
Really? Yeah. Well, Stephen, man, I'm always curious. What made you go from corporate lifestyle to starting and running your own business?
So I guess for me, it was being opportunistic. I think we like to think that we can plan out our lives and we have all these plans and ways of achieving them. And while certainly there were some plans in place, it was more capitalizing on the opportunities that presented themselves. So, a little bit more background. So I worked in the corporate world at Eli Lilly, a big pharmaceutical company, for about 7 years. And then I left that company to move to Colorado where I can see snow on the mountain still. But moved to Colorado for personal family reasons. And then my former employer came back needing some help from me, which opened the door for me to start a business and to start helping them as a contractor. So the opportunity presented itself. Obviously, there were a lot of things that I had to do leading up to that in order to create that opportunity. But yeah, it was very opportunistic.
So it's like a friend of mine says, you didn't seek out entrepreneurship, it found you. Would you say that?
So somewhat. I mean, I had the entrepreneurial itch, but I didn't force it. I waited until the right opportunity presented itself, and then I pounced on it. So I was kind of seeking it out.
Sorry to cut you out there. I was just going to say, how did you decide how to pursue the opportunity? Because that's what I always think is interesting is, the opportunistic nature of entrepreneurship. You're totally right with that. It's like, hey, here's the problem. I want to go solve it. Or, hey, somebody called me. They need help with this problem. Then from there's about 15 other choices about how you want to go about building the business, how you want to solve the problem, all those different kind of things there. How did you choose how you wanted to move forward with this opportunity?
So, interestingly, I actually started, I was self-employed for about 2 years. So when I started my company, it was just me. And I was treating it like an experiment. This was my first time doing an entrepreneurial venture and going out on my own. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And so starting off, the way I approached it was, before I start hiring other people and scaling this business, let's learn a little bit more about myself. Is this a path that I want to go down? And do that when I'm only risking my own, and obviously my family's livelihood, if you will. But So I treated it like an experiment, and for 2 years, it was just me before I decided I wanted to scale the company and decided to grow it into something more and bring in other people.
I would love if we could dive into those 2 years of experiment and, what you're looking at, what are those data points, I guess, if we're talking experiments.
Yeah. I spent total was about 12 years in the Air Force and then 7 years at Eli Lilly. So big organizations. Eli Lilly is 40,000 plus, and the Air Force is obviously massive. So I spent a lot of time in huge organizations, and I didn't know how I was going to feel about not being a part of a huge organization. So that was the first thing that I just wanted to understand. Like, what's it like not having, when you're in a big organization, you have a lot of guardrails up. You have a lot of guidance. You have a lot of, here's what you do. Here's how you do it. Here's the next step. And so I wasn't sure what it was going to be like when I didn't have that anymore. And there were some aspects of it that were very liberating, and there were other aspects of it that were kind of stress-inducing. I had a lot of decision fatigue where you have to make a lot more decisions on your own, and there's not somebody else making those decisions, which sounds great, but that's a lot of stress on somebody to have to make all those decisions for yourself. So I guess that was the first thing with that experiment was, do I like working independently, or do I like being in a big organization with a lot more guidance, guardrails, that sort of thing?
And I'm guessing you decided you wanted to build your own guardrails. Is that what?
No, this is the big plot twist, Dad. He's going to tell us how he went back to corporate and just it fell right in line.
No, I guess, interestingly, what I learned in running that experiment was I learned that being able to take vacation when it made sense. I'm managing projects for the client, I'm doing different things. So I can make the decision for myself when it makes sense to take a vacation, and I don't have to go ask somebody else. That to me was very liberating. And so not having an annual performance review where I'm working to create bullet points that support my value. I'm no longer doing that. Obviously, you still have to do a lot of those same things to provide value for your client, but it's not so that you can check a box on an annual performance review anymore. It's not so that you can earn or justify an annual percentage raise from your employer. It's so that you can do the right thing for your client and so that you can serve them well.
So what's something from Eli Lilly? Because, they've been around for a long time, and they're a very large, successful corporation. What's something that you gained from them that you're using in your own business?
That's a very quick thing that comes to mind is how they treat their people. They treat their people very well. And even to the point where, decades ago, you would hear about companies that would have a defined benefit retirement plan. There's not many of those companies that still exist. Eli Lilly is one of those companies. Most of the people that go to work for Eli Lilly, a lot of them go right out of college and they stay there for their entire career because the company treats them so well. And they did not treat people like they're expendable, like they're there just to do a job for whatever time frame it's needed and then move on. They treated their people as if they're there for an entire career, and they treated people very well.
Do you think it was the longevity that created that culture, or what? Because people can say that, but it's easy. I would say the perception is it's easier to do in a large corporation than it is in a small one. What was maybe a little insight into how they did that?
I think a big part of it was they're headquartered in Indianapolis, very Midwestern culture. I think that was a big part of it. And they were, if not the largest, one of the largest employers in Indianapolis. So huge company within an area that doesn't have a lot of big companies. And so And there's also a lot of strong universities in Indianapolis that they would recruit from. And so I think a lot of people would attend those universities, and then the natural next step was to go to a big company like Eli Lilly. So I think a lot of that Midwestern culture was represented in how they treated their people.
I'm curious. I'd love if we could take a little bit to kind of play the application game on that, because I think it's really interesting. We talk about the generational changes of things, and when you talk about your experience with Eli Lilly, what comes to mind is like the golden watch generation that we always talk about, Dad. Where it's like, go spend your whole career there. They'll give you the watch. It's beautiful. It's all that, and then there's this big rejection of it. And then now, if you look at the climate, the landscape, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of a desire for that connection, but then also we don't trust the businesses. There's these kind of things that are at odds there. So it's interesting to see a company kind of building that up and say, no, we can still do the good thing and take care of our folks and all of that. What's your thoughts, Stephen, on, I guess, how to get that more into the landscape in other businesses? Because we've rejected. We now look and recognize that there were some good things that we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, how do we start to build that more into our modern climate? What are your thoughts on that?
I guess my first thought is that there's a lot of factors like we described about you mentioned the golden watch. I mentioned the defined benefit retirement plan. There's a lot of things like that on the surface that are awesome and sound really good. But I think the thing about that employer below the surface was that they actually treated people really well and understood that people had a life outside of work. And, depending on the phase of life that you're in, whether you have young kids at home, whether you have aging parents that you're taking care of, they understood that people are in a different phase of life depending on what you have going on, and what is important to you and what you value can change throughout your life. And they adapted really well throughout a career so that people could adapt and be able to have a life outside of work.
Now, the layer to that I would love to get into is then, starting your own business. You're like, I want to build that. I want to have this kind of thing. And then you fall into a trap that we've joked about on the show before, Dad, of you become the guy who's like, we're a family. And it's like, ooh, why are you yelling at me so much about being family? Just show me that we're family, and that kind of thing. Because a long-standing business, they can show that they have the track record to point to. What are your thoughts on building that into a early stage business, a startup?
Well, I guess first of all, I'm going to touch on it. You talked about a company being a family.
Yeah.
And even though I want to treat my employees really well, and I want employees to stay around for the long term, I want them to just stay as long as it makes sense. I also understand that my company, we're not a family in that traditional sense, and that if it makes sense for somebody to go somewhere else because of the phase of life that they're in, or an opportunity that presented itself, that's not a bad thing. It could be a good thing. And I want my employees to continue to develop throughout their careers, whether it's working for me or working for somebody else. A family is a little bit different. You're in a family, you're blood relatives regardless, and you've got the crazy uncle that comes over at Thanksgiving, and your family regardless. So I kind of reject the whole idea of a business being a family. I understand it, but I kind of reject it.
How do you communicate that in another way? Because as you lay that out, I mean, it totally makes sense. And we've kind of poked fun at the whole "we're a family" thing. So we're throwing that one out. What's the phrase? What's the value proposition that you use to communicate those same type of values without BSing people about being family?
I mean, I straight up tell people that if it makes sense to pursue an opportunity elsewhere. Especially I guess the example I'll use is if we have a client, and sometimes this happens we do a lot of consulting and engineering project management work for our clients. So it's not uncommon for a client to want to direct hire a contractor. And a lot of the small consulting firms and contract firms like I have get very upset if their client poaches one of their employees. And I actually embrace that. It's never happened to me, so it's easy to say that, I guess. But if it makes more sense for one of my employees to be a direct employee of one of my clients, that's okay. For whatever reason, it makes sense for them. And if I don't make a big deal about that, and I let them go on good terms, they're now working at my clients, and they may come back to me for when they need other support in other ways. Whereas if I make a big deal about it and get upset, I've now burned that bridge, and now there's somebody that works at my clients who no longer has a positive impression of me.
What's it like to be the interloper, to go back into Eli Lilly after working there and be that, oh, you're the guy that left. Now you're the expert sort of thing. What was that like?
So it's interesting that you asked me that, because I still have a lot of emotions around that. When I left Eli Lilly, I left on great terms. I did not leave. It wasn't negative. I left because I was moving to Colorado to be closer to my wife's parents. They understood that. It made sense. So I left on great terms. But I never thought I would be going back. And so that's the weird thing, is that I never thought that I would be doing work, whether it's as an employee or a contractor, in any capacity. I thought I was closing the door on that chapter of my life, and I thought that chapter of my life was behind me, and it was never going to be part. So when I went back, it was an odd feeling, because I thought I'd moved on. So it is a little different, and so it's, to be honest, it's something that I still struggle with. I've been back as a contractor for 3 years now, and it's still something that I struggle with. Now, I was an employee, and now I'm a contractor, and not just a contractor, but I'm bringing on other employees who are working as a contractor at Eli Lilly.
So is it like a sense of loyalty, maybe? I'm just curious why you have that struggle with it.
Yeah, I think there is a sense of loyalty there. I think that's a piece of it. And part of it's because that was never really part of the plan. Like it was like I said earlier, it was opportunistic. So it was never really like part of my plan when I left Lilly that I was going to come back as a contractor. And so I think that's a bigger part of it. It's just, it wasn't expected.
Actually, I think there's an interesting piece there, talking about being opportunistic, finding those opportunities in front of you and following them. And then sometimes that means abandoning the plan or throwing out the old plan, or, however you want to put it, and creating something new. Could you talk some about how you kind of went through that process? Like the way I had it in my notes myself is like, we talked about one opportunity. Now you got to make a plan to go get second, third, fourth, fifth opportunity all the way down the line. How did you shift gears in that and be, not that it was necessarily reactive to be opportunistic, but, into a more proactive state? Yeah,
and that's something that I'm trying to not do, is just because there's an opportunity doesn't mean that you should go after the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so I spent a lot of time, the first person that I brought in, her name is Jenny, and so we had a lot of discussions about who are we as Persperity, my company Persperity. Who are we? What industry are we working in? What opportunities are we going to go after? And there's a part of me that has shiny object syndrome, where there's some shiny object in another industry that I want to go after. But we strategically made the decision we're going to stay within life science manufacturing. So opportunities have to be within that industry, at least for the foreseeable future. At some point, they do want to be able to expand and scale beyond that specific industry. But initially, we're staying within that industry. But then within that industry, what opportunities do we want to go after? And we actually had an opportunity just 2 weeks ago that came up to do some work that is not our bread and butter. And so we talked about, does it make sense to go out and find an expert in that area and bring them in and go after that opportunity? And ultimately, we decided, no, like this is not our area of expertise. We're not going to go after that opportunity. So we let it go.
I got a discussion point on that.
Yeah,
I got a discussion point on that. Yeah. Do you guys think that shiny object syndrome is kind of inherent to being an entrepreneur and having that ability to recognize the opportunity when it's in front of you is the same thing that gets you chasing too many opportunities?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I described early on, the way I started my company was opportunistic. So I went after a shiny object. So wouldn't it make sense that going after shiny objects is the right thing to do? But in reality, you can't go after them all. So you have to balance that. Be opportunistic, but at the same time, know which ones you should go after and which ones it's not the right fit, and don't go after them.
So how are you measuring those decisions? Because, things that are near, like, hey, I've got an expert that can fill that role. Because I've worked with many a company, particularly in the government contracting space, that federal contracts that will do what you just described. And most of them are somewhat successful at it. So how are you keeping the discipline, I guess?
I think it's just each opportunity we have to evaluate it as a standalone opportunity and decide, like, is this within our wheelhouse or is it not? But the other thing that's important to me is, I'm sure a lot of listeners and you guys as well are familiar with the book Good to Great, Jim Collins. And in that book, he talks about getting the right people on the bus first and then finding the right seat for those people. So that's something I'm focused on, is getting the right people on the bus. And so if we get somebody who has the right attributes that I'm looking for Persperity, we get them on the bus, but they have experience in, let's say, aerospace. That's a different industry. But at that point, we've got the person with the right attributes on the bus who they have experience. And I guess technically I have some experience from aerospace from my time in the Air Force. But if we have somebody who has deep experience in that, and there's an opportunity within aerospace, okay, now maybe it makes a little bit more sense to go after that opportunity because we already have somebody on the bus who has that experience. And so we're slowly broadening what it is, our wheelhouse, and what it is that we have experience in.
How'd you go about identifying those first couple hires, growing out that team, and then not only identifying the role, but I think equally as important, the way that you attracted the right kind of people, because that's a whole other aspect of it, right?
Yeah. So I'll describe my first hire first, and again, it was opportunistic. She actually came to me, and she had done contract work at Eli Lilly for decades. And then she'd retired and then decided that she had a few more years left and then decided to come back out of retirement. So she contacted me and she found the opportunity at Eli Lilly. So again, it was a very opportunistic hire. And I'd worked with her a lot in my previous experience. And so I knew that she had the right attributes. She was the type of person that I wanted to work with. So that was, again, opportunistic. And then our next hires after that were, quite frankly, they were opportunistic again, where, I spent a lot of time trying to target the right people and find the right people on LinkedIn and try to recruit them. And then it was actually people that just came to us, who knew us, who said, hey, I know you, I've worked with you before. I like the way that you work. I like your style. Do you have any opportunities? And so it was actually, more opportunistic. I've tried to recruit hires in other ways. And honestly, I haven't had near as much success as just people within our network who we know, like, and trust coming to us. And when I say us, I'm talking Jenny and myself.
Well, one thing that's coming to mind for me is I'm thinking back to one of my business ventures and a boss who wasn't great. We talked a lot of lessons I've learned from my time at I Am a Dad. But the interesting thing that's coming to mind is you're talking about being opportunistic. Is I remember him, and this is a faith-based thing for him, but it was opportunistic in a way where it's like, because this came up, it must be right. And I would love to hear your perspective on that, Stephen, of how you have avoided falling into that. Because I think that's really easy. When the things go up, it's like all the signs are pointing at this. It takes a lot of detail, or it takes a lot of discipline to step back and really analyze that and go, okay, hey, do we want to go after this contract? Should we really hire that person just because they happen to pop up right when we need to hire somebody? What are your thoughts on breaking that kind of a habit there? Because I can see how it's really easy to fall into that pattern more and more and more.
Yeah, and this is, by background, I'm an engineer. I have an engineering degree. I'm very analytical, and I'm a numbers guy. And so even to the point where in a lot of decisions, I create a decision matrix where we have all these different criteria, and I've even done this in our personal life. My wife and I, I created a decision matrix when I decided to get out of the Air Force, and where we decided to go.
It's a safe place, Stephen. You're talking to two guys who do the same thing with their wives.
Awesome. And so I created that decision matrix, and I'll use that as an example. The decision matrix I created when I got out of the Air Force and decided where to go. I had multiple opportunities. I went through that very analytical process, and it said I should take a job that ultimately I did not take because I had a gut feeling that just said something's not right with it. And so the decision matrix, the very analytical part of me said to go down this path, and I chose to go down this path. And it's looking back on it now, 11 years later, I absolutely went down the right path. I have no doubt about it now. And so I think taking that same scenario, that same concept to business, you can have a lot of analytical ways of looking at something and looking at a decision, and then an opportunity presents itself. I mean, it's as hard as it is for me to say this. Sometimes it's just a gut feeling. Everything points that like, hey, you should do this, but something isn't feeling right. And so you've got some intuition there that you got to listen to.
Yeah. I think somebody said this once on the show, Dad. A gut feeling is a skill also, and it's like, yeah, you got to get those wrong, and you got to keep developing it, and it helps you more and more.
Maybe it needs to be an attribute in my decision matrices, just gut feeling, and weight it much higher than anything else. I don't know. But I still, in spite of saying that, like, I'm still a strong believer in having a decision matrix for major decisions, because just going through that thought process helps you understand the way the pros and cons and all the different factors going into a decision. So whether you listen to the outcome of the decision matrix and follow that, it's kind of moot. It's still worthwhile to go through that whole process.
Yeah, well, talk about decision matrix. It reminds me of all my years on staff and trying to think of, it was probably less than 50% of the time where we would show the boss, here's the, go through the whole formal planning process and decision criteria. Here's our course of action decision matrix. And here's what that says. So we recommend course of action 3. And the boss had already, 90% of the time, had already made up his mind that we were doing 1. We weren't doing anything but 1. And it'd be like, that's really nice, but we're going to do it this way. And it's there's value to that because I think the going through the mental exercise of doing a decision matrix and doing that deeper analysis to put the objectivity hat on also helps bring out the intuition in that. Now, any other times when you had that, here's the data says I should do this, gut says I should do that?
I can't think of any other examples, but one thing that I just thought about kind of related to that is as you're going through all the criteria and you're scoring all of them, and then you get a score at the bottom, and if it's not saying what you thought it was going to say or what you wanted it to say, and you start going back on and changing some of your scores, listen to that. Like, that's telling you a lot. Like, why are you going back and altering your scores? And why are you trying to force an output? And there's probably a reason for that, and you should listen to that.
This is what I think is interesting, though, because as much as it's like, yeah, you should be, in tune with your intuition and your gut instinct, and there's a lot of truth to all of that. Your example, Dad, makes me think of something we've talked about a bunch, which is this like management problem that's very American from what I've seen of international management stuff. But it's like we are the best at asking for advice, and we are the worst at taking advice. And it's almost this idea of it's like, Stephen, I want you to explain to me why my thing is wrong, and then I'm going to tell you all the ways that you're wrong, and then that makes me feel better about my thing over here. It's this kind of weird dance that we wind up doing as leaders a lot of the time. What are your thoughts on balancing those two? Because what I'm saying there, that's confirmation bias. That's I already picked this, and I'm going to pick apart everything to make this work. But also at the same time, what's the difference between confirmation bias and gut instinct? I guess is the core question there. What are your thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, and I mean, you hear about this all the time in corporate America, where an organization will spend a lot of money bringing in a consultancy to advise them on what steps to take. And then maybe they'll listen to them, maybe they won't. Depends. They'll do whatever they want to do ultimately. And so, same as what you're saying. I think we do that all the time.
So, in that development of the business and as you start to, you're at that point of growing. What are you doing to put the fence up for yourself so that you don't fall victim to the working in the business like so many other small businesses that are passionate about what they're doing and have that personal connection? What's your process or technique that you're doing to prevent that?
Well, I'm trying to figure that out, to be honest with you. That's a challenge for me. And it's a challenge for me because when we talk about working on the business, for me, that means doing billable work for the client. And so I'm more focused on, executing a project for the client. I'm not focused on scaling Persperity. What I'm passionate about right now and what I'm wanting to pursue is scaling Persperity. But I'm not at a point yet where financially where I can do that. I still need the revenue coming in for the billable work that I'm doing. So to be honest, it's a constant battle, and it's back and forth for me constantly, trying to balance those two. And what I'm excited about is getting to a point where I no longer have to do the billable work, and I can focus all my energy, time, effort on just scaling Persperity, taking care of my employees, focus on that aspect. And I'm not there yet.
Yeah, because you're in that business space of the only reason they're hiring your Persperity is because you. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that, right? It's something similar that we deal with, isn't it, Camden?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's what I was thinking of. That's a interesting piece there, because we're kind of, Dad, you asked the question almost as like, where's your solution, Stephen? I would love to hear what you have duct taped together making it work right now, because you don't have the solution yet. That's totally fine. You're still in the trenches on it. So what are you doing in the trenches?
I guess the one thing I was actually asking for some advice from somebody, this was about a month and a half ago, about this very topic. And they said, well, you're acting like it's all or nothing. Like either you're doing working full-time billable for the clients or full-time for Persperity. Like somehow you got to bridge that gap. So is it 90-10 and then 80-20? Like start to navigate that where it's okay, and giving yourself permission to give up 30% of your time that you're focused on growing and scaling Persperity, and that's okay. And so that was actually it kind of struck me, because I was forcing myself to say, no, I have to give 100% of me to the client until it's zero. And then all of a sudden, then I jump and focus strictly on Persperity. And you're saying, it doesn't have to be that way. So that's lately the duct tape I've been using is giving myself permission to not spend 100% of my time doing billable work.
So when you do that, what's your number one focus now for Persperity when you have that 1% of the 99% of your time?
It varies, depending on the week, depending on the day. But right now, I have a couple proposals that are out there with the client. And so I was spending a lot of my energy on creating those proposals. And then a part of those proposals was also, having staff members listed on those proposals. So it was also in identifying who those staff members are, the people that I have not yet hired. So it was both recruiting and creating those proposals. I'm now at a point where proposals are submitted. I'm waiting to hear back from the client on if we're going to be awarded the work. So it's kind of a lull right now. And so now I'm focused more on creating the internal processes. So an example I'll use is, we send out invoices once a month for the projects that we're working on. We have about 19 different projects we have exactly 19 projects that we're under contract for right now. So that's 19 different invoices I have to generate every month. right now it's me. I'm generating those invoices.
Mm-hmm.
Long term, that's not how I want to be spending my time. So create a process, get that written down, what that process is, so that I can hand that off to somebody else in the future. So right now, I'm focused on establishing those business processes that I can hand off to somebody else, so that I can then shift my focus to other things.
Talking about those processes brings to mind, we were talking about the kind of lessons from your time in the corporate world, and then building that into the business. One of the specific examples I would love to hear from folks that left the corporate world is, what are like the bureaucracy pieces that you want to implement? Because usually the reason people run off to entrepreneurship is it's like, oh my gosh, too much paperwork, all this BS, so many meetings, all that. Are there any nuggets, beyond what we talked about on the cultural level, that you're like, oh, I want to have that? I loved how on Tuesdays we did XYZ, or broke it down on some sort of level like that. Any nuggets you're waiting to implement in that way?
Yeah, and it's funny because when I started my company, I kind of rejected the bureaucracy of the corporate world. And I said, I want none of that. And then over time, I've had to start, okay, maybe I do need a little bit of that. So one of the things that early on, as I'm talking to candidates that I'm interested in hiring, and I realized I can't just offer, let's use compensation as an example. I can't just have a compensation that's specific to each individual person. So I kind of had to create some structure where we have different job levels, and here's a pay band within each of those. Here's example job titles for each of those. So if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said, no way would I create something like that. But here I am. I have it now, because as I'm talking to all these different candidates, I needed something to fall back on. I needed some sort of structure. The other thing that right now that I'm wrestling with is the meetings. You mentioned meetings. I don't want to have meetings for the sake of having meetings. But at the same time, I need to make sure that my staff, that we're all on the same page, that we're marching to the same cadence, which is a little bit challenging because the staff, they spend the majority of their time, they're doing client work. They're not doing work internally for Persperity. They're focused externally on the client. And so what does that mean for marching to the same drumbeat when everybody's off focusing on different client projects? So I'm trying to figure that out right now. What cadence makes sense? I do think we need to get together on some sort of a recurring basis so that we are a team, and so that we are supporting one another, but not overdoing it.
Yeah, it comes down to recognizing, okay, what is the mechanism that was actually working there? Can we keep that, and how much of the BS can we cut off?
Yeah, exactly. One thing that maybe in a year, maybe I'll say something differently, but one thing that I don't think that I'll ever be able to adopt is annual performance reviews. That's one area, maybe with some significant tweaks, but the way that it's currently set up at a lot of large companies, I don't think I'll ever be able to adopt that. I think maybe if it's a lot more introspective, where folks are rating themselves, makes a lot more sense than somebody else rating them. So I do think it's important to measure performance somehow, but the way it's measured in corporate America and kind of the standard, I don't think I'll ever be able to adopt that and implement that.
Yeah, there can be some must check the box bureaucracy in some of those systems, much like the fit reps are in the military, right? You got some people that really use the systems properly, and then others, it's like, yes, I know I have to do this every 12 months, so it's kind of sad how that.
And then it becomes that weird excuse to not do it the rest of the year, like we've talked about before. And it's like, all right, well, so then now we have to do these annual reviews, so I'll just wait to talk to Steven all the time. And it's like, then I'm hitting him with everything at once. Like, that's not a good way to lead. Come on.
So as a leader or as a boss, if you're asking your employees what they did the previous year so that you can fill out the paperwork, it's probably a bad sign.
Yeah. I think, was it Howard Miller, Dad, who said this recently on the show, of if there's any surprises in your annual review, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, that might be an indicator right there.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought the you said several things there in the bureaucracy, forced into the bureaucracy. And I think it's because we all see in a large organization bureaucracy as a hindrance to moving forward as opposed to a tool to move forward. When you went, and we'll pick the easy one, like pay bands, how did you make that to where it felt like it was helping vice hindering action for you and your staff, your team?
I think one way to make sure it's helping is, as I was having compensation discussions with potential candidates or with candidates, I'd always have the back of my mind, like, I don't want to offer them something that is going to put us in a financial situation where we're paying them too much and it doesn't make sense for us as a business. So that was a big piece for me, where I've already done all the math. I've done all the calculations. It's on paper. I know what the pay band is. If we just stay within that, then I know we'll be okay. So I can have an informed conversation with candidates without having this lingering in the back of my mind with, am I paying them too much? Am I paying them too little? I've already done the homework.
That's great. And I think that's for me a great reminder. But what I really like what you said very early on as a reminder and a learned, if you will, is because I love the analogy of the guardrails of the large organization, and how, because it's so true. Back to the bureaucracy becomes the guardrails, but the guardrails are also the things that create the efficiencies that enable it to be a big organization, a large, successful organization, bureaucracy or whatever. So yeah, that's what I learned. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
So I'm laughing because it's we have the entrepreneur example. People would just throw it out. It's like, well, just going to freestyle everything. And it's like, you see the same thing with organizations that go super flat. And they're like, oh my God, it turns out we need management structures. And it's like, well, yeah, there's a reason things exist, folks. Don't just throw it all out. You got to pay a little bit more attention to that. That's my foot stopper. But no, the thing for me that I think is really interesting, and I hadn't fully put this together, of the what we were talking about of being opportunistic and how that ties in. That's the same muscle as that shiny object syndrome. And so it's really useful when you need to find an opportunity, but it's kind of like that whole like anxiety in a crisis. It's great if you have anxiety, then when you're leading in crisis, you are a great leader. When you're leading and things are standing still, you freak out. And I think it's a similar kind of thing there, where if you don't need the opportunity, you got to kind of control that muscle a little bit, not just chase all those shiny objects, but also don't get rid of it, because that is how you're going to find that opportunity when things hit the fan.
Awesome. Steven, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
So actually, Cam, something that you were just talking about is that I was just thinking about. You said something about needing the opportunity and then going after the opportunity. So that's something that I've been very strategic about. I'm not trying to build the biggest business that I possibly can. That's not the ultimate goal. The business that I'm creating is, first and foremost, I want to provide good opportunities for my employees. Opportunities where they're paid well, where they can have the flexibility in their work life to be able to support their families, support their communities, and they're also making a good salary. But for me personally, it's also, it's a business that has financial motivations. But how much do I need financially to support my family? And anything beyond that is why. Maybe there's a good reason to give it away, but I'm not trying to build the biggest, most profitable business in the world. I'm trying to build something to support my family. So do I need the opportunity in order to enable that? Or is it just another shiny object, another opportunity that is there, but maybe it doesn't make sense to go after it? So I think what you just said, Cam, was kind of struck me.
Awesome. Steven, how do folks find you, learn more about Persperity, and maybe hire you in within that frame that you're still shooting
within that buy box? I guess a couple ways. So easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn. Stephen, Stephen, and last name Bump, Bump. So there's not many of us out on LinkedIn. I think there actually might be one other Stephen Bump out there, but he doesn't have a company named Persperity.
It's fake news. That's what that is.
Okay, yeah. But then if you want to know a little bit more about the company, Persperity, that's PERSPERTY.net. If you just go to persperity.net, then you can learn a little bit more about what it is we do and a little bit more about my background.
Awesome. Stephen, man, really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the opportunity. This has been fun. I've enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot, so thank you.
Awesome. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Stephen Bump, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.